I'm going to just download it from Facebook when it's complete, and it's streaming soon. Wonderful. So it's hooking up, and we'll get started here in just a moment. I'm going to tag Andrew on this Facebook post if it'll let me. And then we'll get started. Okay, Andrew, unfortunately, I think I'm just going to have to tag you when we're done. So you'll be able to share it to your page. Hi, Andrew.
Hello, Sarah Poet.
Hi, here we are. So, this is my friend Andrew Saldino, and we have been educators together. We've been parenting, and sharing resources and sharing support. We've been good friends. And so we decided to do this 8-week series on teens and COVID. Yeah.
Awesome. So glad to be here.
It's so good to be here. It's so good to be talking about this. So what I would love to do is start with an introduction of each of us so that listeners get acquainted with who we are in this respect.
Cool.
Do you want to start?
I'll go first. So
Okay,
my name's Andrew Saldino, and my educational background is grew up in San Diego, went to University of Notre Dame, and started teaching high school after college on the Navajo reservation. Really beautiful. And then I got a PhD in philosophy of religion, and taught college for many years and coached high school varsity basketball teams. And then when I had my own children, I got really fascinated with early childhood education and was really enamored with Montessori education, and actually stopped being a professor, went back and worked as a preschool teacher in a Montessori preschool, and wanted to reimagine education from the beginning, like from the foundation up. And then got a Montessori adolescent teaching certification and started a Montessori middle school in Atlanta. Served as the high school director at a really cool alternative high school in Asheville called Odyssey Community School. And then started my own high school program called Aspire High, which was a fantastically cool idea, and really a beautiful high school community emerged out of that. And here I am sitting with you here.
Wonderful. And so what are you doing now?
Well, the high school took a year hiatus. Just felt incredible uncertainty going into the school year. So I'm providing private tutoring and mentoring. And actually, it's really interesting. The mentoring has taken a mindfulness turn. And I'm finding that actually, especially during this time of COVID, but really just dealing with basic teen issues, that the practice of doing mindfulness practices and meditative practices with young people from 13 to 21, it's really a client base now, is just really deeply beneficial for young people to develop awareness, confidence, and resilience in these challenging times. So that's kind of the centerpiece of what I'm doing now.
Beautiful. Thank you. So you went way back in the chronology. So I'll do the same in my education career. So a lot of what I put on Facebook and what I'm, talking about now, and the way I make most of my money now, is not related to education. And so people might be a little surprised to hear me talking about education, but this was the first, 15 years of my adult life was definitely deeply immersed in the field of education. And I'll say that I never worked in, and it sounds like this is another similarity on our path, that we had very just diverse experiences in education and holistic education, and working in places where we wanted to do it differently. So from the very beginning of my education career, I had an undergrad in sustainability studies, and I started working at a nonprofit for male adolescents who had been kicked out of their public school and we were an adventure ed program. And then I took the sustainability studies and became the science teacher and built greenhouses with the kids and taught science through hands-on experiential learning. And through that, I had children who had incarcerated parents who had severe attachment disorders. And this was like my early 20s. And I was looking at them and I was noticing, oh, it's much easier for them to connect to this job of taking care of the garden and greenhouse that we had. It's much easier for them to take care of a plant than it is for them to take care of each other. And so that was like, by the time I was 22, I was having these ahas about the need for deep connection and deep social emotional learning and education. And so I went from there into private residential therapeutic programs and worked alongside therapists and worked with the mental health perspective, weaving that into the academic perspective. And then I became a school administrator. I went back for a master's in special ed at one point, and then another master's in school leadership, and became an administrator here in Asheville at Evergreen Charter, which is a public charter school. Amazing reputation, learned so much from that program, and really focused at that point on the development of character in young people. And we wrote a school-wide program. Really holistic thematic curriculum was always my focus wherever I was. So how do we teach the academics? Yes. And create really rigorous thinkers who are going to go out and be leaders in the world. But at the same time, how are we developing character and really making sure that the humans know themselves and who they are, their place in things, and really that heart level engagement. I really loved, it's no secret, or it won't be after I say this, that the troubled youth, the ones who like the tough nut to crack, was always secretly my favorite. The social and emotional history that really required deep connection with the student in order to bring them forward, because academics at the end of the day are not the most important thing. Who we are and our identity and our character development and our interpersonal skills are very, very important. So I went from there to the last hurrah of my concrete academic years was to start the I won't name what it was, I guess that doesn't want to be said, but it was a private therapeutic high school for individuals with autism. So I have a deep, deep history with children with neurological differences as well. And you came to work for me for a summer between your odyssey at that school. And we spent a summer there together. So maybe, what lights me up about that school is that we were doing things so holistically, and there were these morning meetings where we were teaching the mindfulness and just starting the day with that connection to self and connection to other. So
I was
that's
surprised, Sarah, that we have had like so many conversations over the years about this stuff. Like we're both like passionate about holistic education for youth and continuing to like push that edge of what holistic education actually looks like and can look like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say personally, just to kind of build a bridge between what I did then and what I do now, it was such a privilege to create a school and to create this thematic school that, connected to the heart as well as the mind of the children. But it was in the eventual pressure of people that didn't understand the holistic model that I was being kind of pressured to change the original model and creation of that school. And over the years, it was just more and more apparent to me that children need to be in connection to their own self. At this point, I would say soul. I have these dreams of an entire educational model built around access to the soul and the soul truth of the child. And so when there was this pressure to conform, quite honestly, toward a more original model, that's when I left and created Embodied Breath for Good. And so it is gorgeous. It feels really wholesome inside of me to be talking about these things again, because it was such a huge part of my life for so long and such a deep passion. You know, we're also both parents of, after working with teens for so long, we're both parents of emerging teens right now. So yeah, definitely a passion. Go for it.
I was going to say, one thing that struck me about the time that I was working at the school that you taught at is these students with diagnosis of autism, and I was teaching them, and they all had laptops, and I'd sit right with them over their shoulder and watch these students try to do research and read. And it wasn't until I actually watched how these students were using the screen up and down, that is, they were not reading the content left to right, top to bottom. Students, and more than one, would flip up and down in the text, right? And scroll side to side and click on the ads that were on the side and so forth. And I think after a while, I told you, Sarah, these kids really need to not be on machines.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's I don't think it's serving them right now. And really probably planting a garden would, you know, and having a book in our hands sitting outside would probably be more beneficial for developing the skills that we're trying to develop.
Right, right. So we're here today to begin talking about teens and COVID. And yes, screens are such a part of this day and age. So this is the beginning of an 8-week series. We're going to be talking a lot about mindfulness because we're both trained in that. We both know the power of that. As Andrew was just alluding to, the behavior in the mind and in the brain around a life that is heavily influenced by screens and, you know, constant clicking of tabs and ads and scrolling. And I know that I'm witnessing in my own child that he's a faster thinker. I mean, he's from 11 to 12, so huge developmental age here during COVID. But he's a faster thinker, but the agitation in his personality is also heightened. You know, connection with his own self and like the emotionality is, I would say, disturbed by this period in time. So today we're going to talk about the need for connection and how COVID has really just obviously interrupted connection, but we also want to speak to some of the problems and concerns that if anyone watching has something that they'd like to pop in the comments that they're noticing, we love that too. And then we'd like to talk about a couple of potential solutions. And every week will be like that. We'll open it up with a conversation, and then we'll seek to give concrete skills and additional resources for parents.
Yeah, so there's two things that I see really clearly in this time is that the screen addiction, which was already dramatically prevalent in our young people, has really exploded in the last year, because now it's the vehicle for education, the primary vehicle for education. And so what I'm seeing over and over again is young people just in front of screens for 12, 14 hours a day, and sometimes saying, oh, I'm doing homework. But if you really sit next to them, like I do in tutoring sessions, and watch what they're doing, they're not that much different than the student that I was just referring to with autism, even if they don't have that diagnosis. That is, they are flipping back and forth between tabs, between windows. They take a break from their schoolwork to pick up their phone, and then they're supposed to get back to their schoolwork. So there's a screen addiction, which is, you know, in a sense now socially sanctioned, right? And no parent is going to sit there and literally look over their kid's shoulder at all times to see what they're doing, right? And we got our own problems to deal with and things going on. So that's a huge one. And then really what that contributes to, both directly and indirectly, is the stunted emotional and social development that we're seeing right here. I mean, this time of COVID has been incredibly difficult for those of us with fully developed frontal cortexes, right? And now we have, young people who are in crucial developmental stages, and they've had a year where they are not supposed to, allowed to touch other people, get near other people, talk to other people, and basically get buried in screens. And so, I'll just give one quick example. So I was actually talking to a math teacher recently who tutors and provides really incredible math education outside of the mainstream here. And what he was sharing is that math education has taken an enormous hit in the last year. And he's tutoring so many kids who got jumped from math 1 to math 2, but they didn't finish the math 2 curriculum or the math 1 curriculum because it was online, standards have dropped, it's been challenging time, let's push kids through. So now they get into math 2, and math isn't like the humanities. We can skip a book in the humanities, but you can't skip steps in math. And so these students then, they don't know why they're struggling in math 2 or math 3 or whatever it is. And the reality is it wasn't covered in math 1 because of the pandemic and delivering education digitally. And he says there are holes just all over the place in these kids' mathematical development. And what I would suggest is actually the same thing is occurring with social and emotional development. And we can see those symptoms if we just open our eyes and see what's going on with young people. We can just see that is what's happening, right? Is that social and emotional development is being stunted by societal conditions. And it's important that we just own up to that first and say that's what's happening, and then move towards what we might want to do about it.
Yeah. A lot of this, when we start talking about this, my mind kind of explodes a little bit, and I imagine that parents listening feel in a similar way. It's like, and you and I, with our backgrounds, with our experience, we know what to do about this, quote unquote, but at this point it's like, this is a nation of children. This is a nation of children that is disconnected from one another. And if we had any inkling that screen addiction was a problem before, now we've all sort of naturally or by default, or by just not paying attention to how dangerous it was, we've all like condoned screen addiction as like a national thing right now. So yeah, connection. I want to talk about connection and just sort of scaffold it a little bit. So as to organize the conversation for our listeners a bit, and for me, maybe as my mind blows up in wanting to do everything about everything right now. So there's connection to self, there's peer connection, there's adult connection. And I want to start with the connection to self, because our young people get so much information about themselves by looking at what is going on around them. Now they're primarily relating through screens, which is providing, I guess, or requiring an uptick in just lack of authentic connection between individuals. And so that creates inopportunity for them to develop who they are in their own self-identity. I'm working with one young adult right now, and she is always talking about what's going on with her friends and trying to read what's going on with her friends, but doing so now over screens. And so, you're not getting the full authentic conversation. You're not getting the nuances of body language. It's like, more tricks are being played via text and via, messengers and things like that. Just this like choppy, inauthentic conversation. And she was really getting lost in who am I? And the anxiety was really going up. The where do I fit in? Was a really big question. And this can be at this age, and I want to hear you speak to this because I know you know about this, can be super catastrophic if you don't know your place or if you don't feel like you belong. And so what we've done is really begun cultivating the identity with self. I mean, this is the age where individuation and who am I is truly the developmental stage. This is what kids are doing, and now they're at home and on screens, and so the ability to know themselves is going to be naturally harder, but we can still cultivate it. I know that that's one thing that you and I are both passionate about in our current offerings. So yeah, I'll just pause there and see what you would add to that.
Yeah, I mean, self-awareness, self-knowledge is a tricky business, as we all know. Actually, I wrote both my undergraduate thesis and my PhD dissertation are really on this theme, right, of knowing oneself. And as we think about, like, okay, yeah, as you pointed out, in a sense, self-knowledge has at least three categories. There's like relationship with oneself, there's relationship with peers, and relationship with adults. And for teens in particular, I mean, to become a teenager, when they hit puberty, right, then there is something that happens and that shifts. And that children, before they hit puberty, are really pretty much comfortable being with family, right? And I think this pandemic is definitely less challenging for kids before they hit puberty, because they're not yet at the stage where they are individuating at a deep level. They're not yet at a stage where they're crafting their identity beyond their nuclear family and their biological family. And once you become a teenager, right, you're trying to figure out, like, who am I in the world? Where do I belong? Right? Where do I have a sense of belonging? Right? And that I feel accepted and loved. And it doesn't matter what tribe you have, but as a teenager, it matters that you have a tribe. And now I'm watching my 14-year-old son try to develop a tribe through various, Snapchat and through Discord, right? And engaging in these group chats and video chats. And it's really interesting to hear him talk about all the social dynamics that are occurring and the faux pas and people saying things that are, inappropriate, and how that gets, how people learn what is okay to say and not say. And how do you tell someone, like, hey, that joke's out of line. Like, you can't make that joke. That's not okay. You're out of line. And people aren't getting the social cues because they're just texts being dropped back and forth. I mean, even as an adult, as soon as I feel any emotional content in text that is negative, I'm immediately looking to get off text and get on the phone or in person, right? And I feel like that's an important thing to teach young people too, is like, don't have these emotionally, if you feel activated by something that's going on or somebody else does, like, switch formats, right? Pick up the phone and call them, right? So that you can understand the tone and what's going on and limit some of the miscommunication that occurs through these video formats. So yeah, it's a really, really crucial time for teens developmentally to learn so many things about who they are, and their self-knowledge comes both through relationship to self, relationship to source, universe, nature, peer relationships, and then also crucially the adult relationships. What are the relationships, mentor-mentee relationships that students are having, so that they can see examples of beautiful lives being lived by adults, beautiful flawed lives, right? And being okay with those flaws and picking out what we like from these adults and being like, oh, that's amazing. Like, that person's really, impressive. I would like to kind of emulate that a little bit in my life. So it's this really crucial stage of development, and it's just hard to do when we're not getting the inputs that we need to develop properly.
Yeah. And so where my mind is taking me now is, there are schools similar to the ones that we've worked in or the ones that we've created that did understand social and emotional learning and character development. And one excellent resource that I love to refer is Paul Tuff's How Children Succeed. And there's a lot of information that's like, academics is not the most important thing anymore, folks. Like, if you are not developing your character, if you are not developing your sense of identity, if you are not able to relate to other people, those are the markers of true success that are going to most impact outcome. Those are also what we have potentially less access to right now, which is what we're saying. But these schools that have been innovative or have been on the leading edge of incorporating the character, learning targets right alongside of the academic learning targets, and the schools that have the centering practices, the mindfulness practices right inside of schools, the teachers who understand true connection, which I think, is just so characteristic of, you don't go into education unless you like connecting with kids. And so there's so much lost even in the access to the teacher in all of the ways that teachers are present in the classroom and all of the nuances that they teach. And, if there's a conflict between two kids, the teacher's often going to come in and mediate, or, have a real conversation about that. We're missing all of that right now.
For teens, I would actually argue that the adults in their life, the non-parental adults, are actually the most important social connection for young people. Because just imagine a group of teenagers trying to raise themselves, right? It wouldn't turn out so well. But
Right.
An adult with, a teen who is with adults, right? That teen might turn out okay. And they've tried this with elephants. They took away all the elders from the community and let the elephants raise themselves as teens. Mm-hmm. And the negative adolescent teen behavior became the dominant social, context for these elephants. That is, the teens can't raise themselves. They need adults around them to show them ways of being in the world. And by the time they hit puberty, they are done listening to their parents tell them about any of this stuff.
Which
right?
is appropriate developmentally. Yes. Individuation is appropriate. We want that, but we also need the non-parental adults in the children's lives. And just to be really clear, I didn't mean to cut you off, but this is one of the things that you and I can provide right now. It's one of the things that we are providing to teens right now, and we wanted to let more people know about that during this. But go ahead and continue.
That's it. And the value of letting other adults play an important role in your kids' lives. And it's harder to make happen now because activities are curtailed, schools were curtailed, and so reaching out to people that are actually providing those services is valuable. And the mindfulness work that I've been doing with teens has just been blowing my mind in terms of how impactful it's been, in terms of this isn't necessarily about social connection, but it is, in a sense. It's like I play the role of the mentor in leading mindfulness practices and the impact that it's having on students' self-awareness, self-understanding, and experiences of peace internal that have nothing to do with external validation in the world, right? Which is what we're talking about with peer input and so forth. The experiences of having internal satisfaction in relation to oneself and finding peace within oneself are just really, really crucial right now. And the opportunity is there for that. And it's really been exciting for me to be able to provide that.
Wonderful, because we're talking about the need for immense resilience in this time. And when we do go inside and know who we are and have access to the skills that we're teaching in mindfulness, these are the true skills of resilience. So I have a kind of a funny story because I would love for us to touch on two things before we conclude for today. One, like, what can parents do? Some ideas of what can parents do? Because so I have a just turned 12-year-old son. Individuation is real. This is the very time that, biologically he's individuating from, biologically, psychologically individuating from the mother, but it's just he and I in the house together when we're in the house. So it's like, sorry, kid, this is me, right? So we need some skills as parents, what to do when the children are individuating, and it's a healthy time for them to do that, how to support that authentic self-identity and the individuation process, right? I kind of want to touch on that. And then I do want to come back to adults who are not the parents and how we can create networks and team together in order to get our kids what they need. So I just have a funny story that's just, one of these like case in point moments when my son and I went to the gym this morning, and he's on a treadmill that he really likes to make it go up the whole way. And so he's like doing his lunges on there, and the thing will not go back down. And, he's been, I'll say, fiery, like does not want to talk about emotions, especially because mom's talking about emotions, right? So here I am. I know all about the social emotional learning. I know about mindfulness. My own kid doesn't want to hear me talk about those things. He's been here. I used to teach in his classrooms the mindfulness. He can have access to it. I'm mom, and the natural thing is for him to push that away. So we have a non-parental adult that he meets with weekly that teaches these same skills, right? Okay, so we're in the gym, and he's like standing on it was very obvious if he walked away from that point that the machine was not in the right place, right? But he's like, I don't know how to fix it. And it went 0 to 10, and it was like anger combined with some tears. Whisper that part. And so as to not embarrass. And it was just like, what are we gonna do? And so I stood and, mirrored calming down, like mirrored the in-breath and the out-breath. And I said, so what is it underneath? I said, the machine won't work. Like I named what was happening, right? Name it, validate it. The machine's not working. The machine's stuck. And then I said, but if you go in, what is inside? Is it anger at the machine? Is it, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed because it might be broken and somebody's going to find out? I said, I can guess at these things, but it would be helpful if you would let me know right now, like what's underneath. And then I just took another big, deep breath and kind of gave it space. And he said, well, obviously it's that I'm afraid that it's broken. And I was like, okay, I think we still need another breath, right? Like we're not quite ready to rationalize yet, because that's like the mindfulness would teach us to regulate the brain so that we're able to have some conversations. He wasn't there yet. And so we did another breath, and then I asked permission, may I give suggestions, right? Because if I go in with you should, it's resist, resist, resist. So by that time he was ready for me to make a suggestion. And I said, I'm going to try to unplug it and plug it back in and see if it works. And it did. And then he was calming down. And then another sort of parental tip is I get parenting wrong like all the time. Also, I'm just giving this tip right now. I was able to go back and share with him, like, do you see what happened there? If we had stayed in the original fight or flight, I didn't use that wording with him, but if we had stayed in the original panic, we wouldn't have been able to get to the solution, right? There would just have been escalation, which would have been really way more difficult to reach the solution. So I think people listening can kind of pick out some things there that are tips. Really encouraging the like self-reflection, look in, really encouraging the full exhale. It's not really so much the deep breath in as it is the full exhale out. And then like coming back to regulation and not really having a conversation until that's been done. Yeah. So what comes up for you when I share that?
That's it. I think we'll wrap it up now. But I'll just mirror a couple things you said back, because I think that's like, right on. Like, what tools do parents have? We are stressed,
Yeah.
right? We are all operating with 20% probably more or more extra stress and anxiety in our lives for the last year, and our kids have at least that much. And so these opportunities for dysregulation are quite high, both in us and them. And the reality is that, like, if our kid flips their lid, right, from this kind of like, is no longer able to do things in the frontal cortex, but is really just in the emotional, brain, we can't flip our lid, right? And if we flip our lid, we gotta step away and step until we can regulate. We cannot ask our children to regulate themselves if we are not able to regulate ourselves. And then, yeah, once that regulation, hopefully we can stay, stable through that process. And once we're able to regulate, then we can invite regulation on their part through techniques that we can share in another episode. And then, yeah, once the regulation occurs, I think parents way too often, we're trying to engage our children when their lid is flipped, right? And it's like nothing, if we step back and think about it, we'll see nothing good is going to happen here. There is no rational conversation that can occur with a child or a teen or an adult who is unregulated in that moment, right? And just like, and their nervous system is just in fight or flight. And so, but then once the calm settles, then asking open-ended questions, invitational questions that are not top-down questions. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Tell me, what were you thinking? Tell me what you're feeling. And the more information you can get from your kids, the more self-awareness you create in them, and the more opportunities you create for growth in your relationship with them. So I'm just mirroring back.
The more they have the opportunity to feel like an individuated human, because that's really what they need, but they're not getting that from the peers, from the schools, from the other adults right now. So I would love for us to finish with letting people know where to find us, because we're both available for working with teens, working with families and mediations to get you through, these humps that these times are providing. Would you like to go first?
Yeah, is there somewhere maybe afterwards also just type it in the bottom or something, but Aspire High Asheville is a website for the program, and there's a mindful mentoring link that's very prominent on the webpage that kind of details the services that are being offered that really have arisen out of watching what's going on, right? And just seeing what is working and what the needs are. So yeah, it's aspirehighasheville.com, and I'll put it in the wherever I'm supposed to write that, I'll write it.
Wonderful. And sarahpoet.com/teens. I'm working primarily with teens to develop identity, like personal identity. So being that non-parent adult. And, like I was saying in the beginning in my school career, there's no child that's like too weird or too defiant or too diagnosed or too, for me, I'm like, yeah, bring them on. Let's get to the souls of these beautiful humans, that I know we're both really passionate about. So thank you everyone for tuning in. We're going to come back next week and talk specifically about mindfulness with teens. Whether you already have a mindfulness culture in your family or are just beginning to develop one, Andrew and I know from working with groups of teens that mindfulness is an area that needs some finesse when approaching teens, because it's got to be like cool to do some mindfulness, or we're not going to do it, or it's got to be one-on-one when nobody else is looking. So I look forward to next week's conversation. Andrew, thank you so much for doing this, and for your service in the world and your passion, and yeah, it's a pleasure.
You too, Sarah. Thank you so much for
Yes,
making this happen. Take care.
thank you.